Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the June Free Eagle Luncheon. Can everybody hear me in the back? We've got screens everywhere so you can watch the presentation. One thing I'd like to do is start off, thank Randy Ford. This is Jay Gilligan, he owns it. And then Mary, who you see in the middle right there. She makes everything happen. And also Bob and Tanya, get them around. And then I'd like to thank my wife, checking everybody in, Beverly. And also Bob Lyons, who's second in command, and Don Gates. And then we got Jock over here doing the video. And then Alan Brock. Alan loves doing RSVP, so I just let him do it. And then from Gray Eagles, we got Bill Rose as the secretary. Here's Bill. Stand up, Bill. Okay. Bill used to handle these really nice name tags, but now you do it on the website. Plus, if anybody here is not a Gray Eagle, hey, we want you to keep coming, but join now before the prices go up. Cheryl Guff is our auxiliary member, chairman. And then Earl Bruner, where's Earl? Earl right there. Earl is an APA liaison. He is still an active pilot, American. And then we got Jeff and Janet Linhart. Jeff, their membership, they do a lot. And then I always like to ask this question, how many active pilots do we have here right now? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. That's great. Who's the youngest pilot? Who's got more than 5 years to retire? Okay, we won't go any further.
I retired 2 days ago.
Stacy Hull, I always want to give a shout out to her. She's not here, but she's APA. She does all of the little cards we send out and everything. That's Stacy. Another thing, we have 14 spouses here today. 14. And are the Canatellas here, Mike and Lauren? Okay, I counted them as 2. And we're going to be introducing General Kelk, John Kelk. He just retired in March, A320 pilot. But also I want to recognize General Bob Jones. He flew 100 missions, F-100 in Vietnam. And Bob was a 767 check airman. And he and Joyce come faithfully every time. Do we have any more generals? That's just a general question. I write my own stuff. How many F-15 pilots do we have? Got Jeff. Who else? Is that it? All right. How many Marine H-46 pilots do we have? Okay, that's it. They're still confused how I got hired. Our next meeting is going to be in September. We're going to take July, August off. In September, it's going to be interesting based on the economy and hiring. You know, we had Dina here. She said we're going to hire 10,000 more pilots, and now they stopped hiring for the year. So things change. The only constant is change. So we might have a guy named JC, who's the Senior Vice President of Flight, talking, and that'll be very interesting. One thing I wanted to show you, the surviving spouse checklist. Since we have 14 spouses, we have copies up here. This comes off the Gray Eagles website. If y'all haven't been on the Gray Eagles website, a lot of good information. Also, they have an AA20 self-serve guide on the website. So a lot of good information on there. Got the convention coming up in October, November. So we'll be getting more information out on that. It's going to be really good. It's a celebration. Okay. Where is, let me see, Reagan or Kendra? Where y'all at? Yes, would y'all get up come on up here real quick and just talk about it.
Thank you, Charlie. I'm Reagan Hine with Flight Administration, and this is Kendra Wright with Flight Administration too. You'll notice on your table there's something called Celebration. We're going to pass this around for all of you to sign. Shelley Forcore, her last day is on Friday. If you guys remember Tom Egbert here a couple weeks ago, this is his right hand at the base. If you were ever based at DFW in the last 27 years, chances are you saw Shelley. And if you didn't see her, but you still got your keys, your badges, and your parking, that's the magic, that's Shelley. Behind the scenes, flight admins take care of everything for pilots. So, Kendra, what else can we add?
Well, we have here just a QR code, just as a token of our appreciation for all her service that she's done. She's helped so many, inspired so many pilots and flight administration team members throughout the company. And it's just, and we created this GoFundMe just to show our, it's just a small token of our appreciation for her retirement. So if
you want people to sign the back?
We do.
Yes.
We're passing this around. This one's for the Great Eagles to sign and pass around. So we'll collect that. We'll start sending it around to everybody. We appreciate that.
Yeah, and if you would like to contribute to the GoFundMe, you're more than welcome to. It's definitely not required. Just sign it on the back of the poster. That'd be greatly appreciated.
And you know what? If you're not familiar with GoFundMe, when you go onto it, it'll have this weird fee. Slide that bar all the way to the left, so the fee is 0. So we just want the money to go to Shelley, not GoFundMe. Thank you, everybody. We appreciate you, and we miss you. For those of you that are retired, those of you that are retiring, you'll be seeing a new great person at DFW soon. So thank you.
And this is our chance to show appreciation to the people that support us and have supported us. Okay, now for our main speaker. I wish Eric Roth was here because he gives such a great presentation. He was a check airman on the A320 with John. And Eric's really he's a Marine helicopter pilot, but he's really into military history and everything. And he all of a sudden heard, hey, we got a general here and an F-15 pilot. And he shot the first MiG down. And Eric goes, who the heck is that? He says, guy you've been working with. And that just shows how humble John is. It kind of reminds me of all the talent like Bob Jones and others, how many people we have amongst us. Anybody know Bob Jeffries?
Yep. Yep.
Freddie Flom?
Yep.
Yeah, I was reading a book called The Raid about Sante. And Bob and I were talking. I said, yeah, I'm reading this great book. And Bob goes, yeah. And I said, yes, about the raid, Sante. And he goes, yeah, I was there. I said, oh, really? What were you flying? He goes, no, I was there. He was in the camp. He was a POW. And you know who his roommate was? Freddie Flom. And so, I mean, it's just amazing the people that we have amongst us. Here is John's JB. Here is his resume. It's unbelievable. I'd read it, but we got to be out of here at 2 o'clock. Phenomenal what he's done, and he'll correct me if I'm wrong, but yeah, and this is kind of interesting. I got in the military in 1973 at the downswing. Everybody was sick of it. He got in 82 in the upswing. And it's kind of like getting hired in America. You know, you get hired. People got hired in 1964, made captain in 3 years. People got hired in 1967, flew flight engineer for 12 years. So it's just unbelievable the timing. People that got hired in 1990 got furloughed, you know. But John really hit it right, got to fly the F-15, and it was so interesting hearing about the first night. And he was in the embassy. We're going to talk about this. He was in the embassy in Kyiv, Ukraine, as a major general. So there's a lot of good information, but I'm going to let him speak, and afterwards, the question, the Q&A, that's when we will really ask everything you want. So, John?
Can everyone hear me okay? I hope in the back, y'all can hear me? Thumbs up? Okay. If for whatever reason you can't, just holler out. I don't mind. Thank you, Charlie. Generous introduction. He kept saying John. I don't even have to turn around. Who's he talking to? Everyone knows him as JB, right? So No, I mean, that's funny how we get names, call signs and whatnot, right? So anyone who's been in the Air Force gets a nickname, a call sign, whatever, and that's kind of how you, I mean, even my wife calls me that unless she's mad at me, then it's my middle name. But a little bit about, what I'll talk about, just kind of the big picture. I've got a little PowerPoint presentation that's 15, 18 minutes long in the cost. And what this will go through is it'll go through the first night of the Gulf War that I was a part of. And then we'll open it up for a Q&A. And please ask me anything, I don't care, all right? Questions that this raises and whatnot, so don't be shy. I don't mind. This was in 1991, okay? And about 9 or 10 years after the fact, a friend of mine, he was our flight surgeon at the time when we were over in Saudi Arabia. He called me, and he was then, at the time, he was a colonel, medical group commander at Langley Air Force Base. And he calls and said, hey, JB, would you come and be our guest speaker for Dining In? You go, sure, why not? I mean, he was a great flight surgeon, still a great friend today. But I thought about it and said, how am I going to tell this kind of a story to a group of medical professionals? You know, I mean, standing up and, you know, talking with your hands like most pilots do would just go nowhere. So I said, all right. PowerPoint was starting to become pretty active in like 2000-ish. So I said, you know, I'm going to put this in a PowerPoint brief, and then I'm going to keep it. All right. So this is unchanged from about 20 plus years ago. So you'll see some of the animation and graphics probably aren't what we could be producing today, but my motive was twofold. One, I didn't want to mess with it anymore, number one. Number two, though, is my experience with war stories is they behave like a good French red bottle of wine. They improve the longer that they age. I still have reunions in our squadron that was participating in this. We get together every 5 years. And we have a great time. We're all very close still to this day. But as the night goes on and people start telling stories, and I go, you know, I was on that mission. I don't quite remember it that way. So what I thought is if I put this together while I still have a fairly decent recollection and then keep it unchanged, my story can evolve into that bottle of red wine that I see frequently happen. So anyway, that's kind of what we're talking about. And once again, we'll go through this, and at the end, please ask me any questions. So to get this started, and I'm really hoping technology works here for me. Uh-oh. There we go. August 1990, here we are, Iraq, and I've got my little clicker. Doesn't seem to work. I'll do it with my hands if needed. But if you remember, Saddam Hussein decided it would be a good idea to invade Kuwait. All right? And so he marches his troops into Kuwait about 3 weeks later, and this will get caught up. There we go. The response from the U.S. and the world was unimpressed. And so myself and 24 F-15s, along with 36 of my best buddies, we ended up in this little air base called Tabuk, Saudi Arabia. Anyone been there? Tabuk, Saudi Arabia? Yeah, lovely place, eh? It's just like Las Vegas. All right. In terms of dryness, elevation, and topography, that's where the similarities end. Okay, you're middle Saudi Arabia, small little town. But anyway, we got there 3 weeks after, and we were one of the first group to set up shop in Saudi Arabia, where we sat for the next 4.5 months. All right, just planning, training, planning for what might be. So that kind of sets the stage for where we're at now. This is Iraq, 1990, all right? Third largest air force in the world, 600 aircraft. You see the top ones, the MiG-29, most latest, MiG-23 and their Mirage F-1. Surface air missiles on the top there, they had plenty of those. Our AAA, ZSU-23 Force, for those who are familiar with that, 100 rounds a second, shoots up to about 10 to 12,000 feet above the ground. So that was part of their arsenal, and then in the upper left corner, you'll see the Scud missile. All right, and that became a big planning factor because those things were pointed at Israel. I'll talk about that in a moment. In the center of it, that circle that you just saw expanded was Baghdad. What's significant about Baghdad? Well, in the architecture of the Iraq military, it's very Soviet style, which means centralized command, centralized execution, whereas we more in the West focus on centralized command, but decentralized execution, meaning we do our planning element and we push it out to the field and we let the field decide how they want to do it, which is different than the old Soviet style. So when you're devising a war plan, that big old center around Baghdad becomes a critical planning element, what we call a center of gravity. If you hit that, then the rest comes crumbling down. So as I describe the plan of attack, keep your focus on that, and it'll explain why we devised this plan the way we did. But as I said, third largest air force rather in the world behind us and Russia. So that sets the stage. So here we go. I call this the surprise attack plan, underline surprise. So 3 in the morning, the helicopters, the Army, are going to try and take out these listening posts that you see along there. They had literally guys with listening posts, listening for fighters and other things flying over that they would report to Baghdad. The F-117 stealth fighter, remember that? It was its debut in combat. So we're going to fly that thing right over downtown Baghdad, unescorted, because nobody can see it. It's evasive to radar, and take out the command and control center. Meanwhile, F-15s, the upper left part of your screen, the gray model, the 2-seater bomb dropper version, is going to try and find those Scud sites that were in Western Iraq pointed at Israel. It's very important to keep Israel out of this conflict, to keep the coalition alive. Finally, you'll see in the lower right, you'll see F-15s, light grays as we call them, air-to-air, and that's what I flew. We're just hanging out south of the border while all this is going on. All right. The thought is that we could go in, attack those various sites, and then have our friendlies leave without the requirement for air-to-air support. So as this would progress, now it's about 3:15 in the morning. The friendlies, you can see they're heading out of town. You got bombs and everything going off. And then after they've safely gotten back into Saudi Arabia, that should store up the hornet's nest. You see the red arrows there with the big bad guys. And then we, as the light gray F-15s, air-to-air guys, would sweep in and we'd have this fish in a barrel, right? No friendlies in front of us, the perfect scenario for what you want to fly against, and we'd have our way. So, good plan, right? And yeah, you know, we have plan and then we have execution. Okay. Now it's funny to me, as I said, I've left this brief, you know, untouched. Why on earth I chose lime green for the F-15s, I have no idea. It's absolutely the worst color. Red guys are always bad, but why I chose the F-15s and lime green, I have no idea. I don't know what scotch I was drinking that night when I did this, but anyway, margarita, yeah. So okay, so that's the plan. Let's talk about what happened. So 3 in the morning, our Army helos, they do diligently attack some of the listening posts. Okay, you can't get them all. And we're hanging out just south of the border. Meanwhile, in the upper right, the F-117, right at 3 in the morning, bombs going off, I can see it. The F-15E, the dark gray, is looking for Scud sites. It's a needle in a haystack. Nothing. They're not going to see anything. Notice those red arrows just came up, all right? That's bad. So the AWACS sees that, and they go, F-15s, push now, the lime green guys. And guess who is just finishing air refueling? Okay? And guess where I am in my 4-ship? Right there. About 70 miles detached from the other 4-ship. Yeah, oh crap, 4 months of planning, and now this. So we didn't anticipate that. So here we are, right, in the lead group. We were supposed to be going as an 8-ship of F-15s, and now we're just 4 with the other 4 behind us, about, at the time, 70 miles. And by the time they got turned around, we were about 90 to 100 miles in trail. Not what we planned, okay? But what, flexibility is key to air power, right? So, and remember, this is at 3 in the morning, so it's dark. All right, so let's continue on with this. I call this, what's wrong with this picture slide? Remember how we didn't want to have friendlies and bad guys mixed up in the same? That causes us a problem, and even though we have electronic measures to determine what we call friendly or foe, that's still not the scenario you want. And Jeff will agree with me on this. As a long-term air-to-air fighter guy, The worst thing, the worst possible scenario I can ever imagine is shoot down a friend. All right, it just is one of those things you just would never ever be able to live with. So I'd rather be shot down than shoot down a friend. It's kind of that mentality. And so even though we have measures to identify, that's not the picture you want, because electronic systems can sometimes not go well. So that's what we're dealing with. But it is the first night of the war, and we've got a mission to do, and so we do it. So I'll develop this a little bit. I'll expand that picture somewhat. So I'm the third guy from the left, all right? And you'll see that red line, that's a MiG-29. You see the whiskers on the two of us, so we're both getting lit up like a radar detector in your car. So I can tell that someone's locked to me. Meanwhile, I'm trying to find who it is. I look on, that's F-15Es that are positively responding. And then I finally found the guy who's locked on to me. Now we are at about 30,000 feet. My pointer's not working, so I'm gonna come over here and, excuse me. So I'm over here and I'm 30,000 feet, our old four ship. These guys are leaning towards what we think is more fighters over there, and this is my wingman. We're both getting that indication because we're far enough away. It's kind of a bandwidth sort of thing. And so, but he's at 7,000 feet, which is where the F-15Es, the guys on the left side of your screen as you're looking, are as well. The difference being is that this guy is climbing. So initially at 7,000 feet, I'm at 30. I watch this progress, and by the time we get closer, he's at 17,000 feet. So by rule of elimination, if you will, it's not the friendlies going home and staying down low trying to evade radar. This guy clearly has ill intent, me in this case. 7 to 17,000, I'm at 30, and I'm getting indications he locked on to me. Meanwhile, he is not properly responding electronically to the things that I'm interrogating this guy with. So all of those sets of criteria is what you go through in a fairly limited amount of time, I might add, to satisfy what we call rules of engagement. All right, so everyone kind of with me so far where this is going? So, all right, so I'll develop this now. So the engagement continues. My wingman does a defensive maneuver because he hasn't seen anything, and then I satisfy my criteria and I shoot. Now, again, this is a depiction because if I did this at night, that'd be a blank square, all right, with a flash. So work with me a little bit on this. And so I shoot, missile comes off, and then I do a maneuver away. And the purpose of that maneuver is to slow down the intercept. In other words, if he's coming head on to me, and I've got the high ground, right? He's climbing up to me, and it's just like our Army friends always want to be on the top of the hill shooting down, right? The kinematics of missiles. This is going to do a whole lot better than a missile trying to climb up 10 or 13,000 feet to get to me. Furthermore, is when you lean away, that complicates the missile solution. So not only does it have to climb, it has to climb and pull lead on me. So it's somewhat of a defensive maneuver on our part, called an F-pull for those fighter guys in the crowd. And also we're going to drop chaff. Chaff is something that confuses the enemy radar at this time. It's little cut strips of metal and aluminum that's cut to a specific radar length to break the lock of the enemy that's locked to you. In this case, it worked. All right. So as this continues, my radar lock goes away. Chaff worked. Right? I did this maneuver, and then I turn back in, and then I look, and I want you to pay particular attention to that purple color. All right, and contrast that with what you see on the upper right of your screen. All right. A couple of confusing things happened during this maneuver. First is when I did this maneuver, I dropped chaff, as I said. But number two is I went to jettison my wing tanks. On the earlier picture you saw, we carry wing tanks. Extra fuel that when you get rid of, you just get rid of the tank, jettison, and then you are lighter, more maneuverable. Well, I went to jettison, and guess what? It didn't come off. So you go, crap. All right, that's number one. Number two is as I came and turned in, I looked at that purple blue. It was like a bright sparkler coming low line of sight, just doing this, but it was very, very bright for about 2 seconds, 2 to 3 seconds, and then totally went away. I've been on plane on training missions, shot missiles over the Gulf of Mexico, and I've blown up drones and other things, and that's what it looks like, that orange fireball. And once again, I can't highlight enough, when you get just a couple of elements of confusing data signals, right? And we as pilots know that. It can play a little bit in what's going on, right? But in this case, I kind of had to play correlation or odds or whatever else. I was pretty convinced something bad was happening to this guy, all right? Just didn't know what. My radar lock, that was heat to me, had gone away, so that's good. And then this and no more. So that's kind of the build up of this. So I eventually catch up with everyone else. Now, mind you, I got 3 tanks. My buddies only have 1. You know, so I'm trying to keep up, but not use afterburner in the middle of the night, because you don't want to give away your position to some ground troop who could see that. So we sweep up by Baghdad, hang a left turn, and guess who shows up? That bottom 4 ship, finally, who was supposed to be part of the original 8. And so they finally now are crossing into Iraq. And as this plays out, all right, keep going. 2 more, in this case F1s show up. And this is what I call a taxpayer special. Number 1 shoots a missile and downs one of them, and his wingman flies into the ground. So 2 for 1, 2 for 1 special. 1 missile, 2 kills. You say, kill's a kill, and he got credit for it, you know, so that's good on him. So we continue, now we're pointing south. In the upper left corner, my 4 ship is coming south, and you know, we'll go continue across the border, kind of wave, you know, as we're going by our friends, hey, good luck, happy hunting, wish you'd have been here with us when we crossed the border, and off we go. Now, and we crossed the border and safe up. The other thing I didn't mention was we carry these. It's a radar-guided missile that I shot. It's called an AIM-7 Sparrow, and it's about a 500-pound missile. So when you shoot, you know, you can feel it come off the airplane. But this was at night, and this was before we were flying with night vision goggles. And so, if you remember, at night you would build up your night vision, you know, Robson cones, all that stuff. And so we learned through training to get actually quite good at flying formation at night, just with small position lights and whatnot. So when I shot, I actually closed my eyes because I didn't want the flash blindness, all right? And then, poof, I felt it come off. So if I'm carrying 4 of these radar-guided missiles and I shoot 1, that should leave 3 remaining, correct? This isn't a quiz, all right? So, unfortunately, on my armament panel, we had some fairly new software at the time. And so when I'm doing that defensive maneuver, after I shot and I felt this plunk come off the airplane, I look down, it shows all 4 missiles on board. I go, you gotta be kidding me, right? And that, you know, but I knew what I knew, and so I stayed with it. But now that we crossed the border, I had my, you know, the whatever, one of those Dirty Harry movies, I got to know moments, and so I told my wingman, fly underneath me, do a battle damage check. We would just make sure nothing's wrong with the airplane. He flew underneath my jet, and I said, please tell me I'm missing 1 missile, because you are. And I said, this could be good. So anyway, so we go back and land. It's, again, 3 in the morning. I got back and landed about 5 in the morning. We go to debrief, and, you know, I mark down the claim. You know, you claim a kill, and then and I was flying the next day. I had a noon takeoff the next day, you know. So, and someone can ask me crew comments later, but it's war. Well, I remember coming in, I tossed and turned in my hooch for about 2-3 hours, and I replayed this engagement over and over and over in my mind, the timing. And so I came back in at 9:30 to get ready for the next mission, and I went to my squadron commander. I said, boss, I played this in my head 100 times. I mean, I'm going to change it from a claim to a confirm. I know what I did, I know what I saw, I know what I shot, and I saw the outcome. He goes, you can't do that. I said, what do you mean I can't do that? I'm telling you. He says, AWACS already called and confirmed it for you. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. All right, so that was that. So I flew the next morning. So my next 36 hours, I told you, I took off at noon the next day, and we got 2 MiG-29s. I was not doing the shooting, but I was right there with it. And then landed from that. The following morning, we had an early morning sortie that busted. We landed at 9 in the morning, said, can you guys get airborne immediately and for an extra sortie? I said, sure. So in the far left corner, there was 2 more MiG-25s, and I was part of that as well. I was not doing the shooting, but I was right over the top of it. And then 20 miles due east, those 2 extra were 2 MiG-29s, and another 2 ship was engaging. And I was actually flowing towards those guys when they engaged those. So I was part of that action as well. And then for the next 2 weeks, my squadron totals, we got 3 MiG-23s there in the middle. And then curiously, the Iraqis thought it was smart to evade into Iran to preserve their fighters, which we thought was curious. They just fought an 8-year war with these guys into Iran. And so we set up a barrier cap between, excuse me, Baghdad and Iran. And it was about a 650-mile flight, by the way, to get there. And there was other Eagle units in the east side of Saudi, and for whatever reason, they didn't want that tasking. We never said no to any additional tasking. So we said, yeah, we'll set up a cap, and sure enough, got 4 more kills out of the deal. So I was not part of that. And then, so for our total, here's what we ended up. So our squadron ended up with 16 kills, almost half of the total in the Gulf War. So yeah, pretty good showing for our squadron. Like I said, we still get together about every 5 years and tell these stories. And as I said, they do tend to morph a little bit. So this is genuine from 20 years ago. How's that? Finally, I call this my persistence slide. Remember I said plan and execution when they come together? So this was 14 years after the fact, and I'm in the foreground here, the one closest to you, and we briefed up, we're all gonna shoot against a drone in this case, and ready, fire. We had a camera ship kind of sitting where I'm standing, filming this whole thing, and amazingly, all the missiles all came off, and they all guided, and we smoked the drone, and it was a good thing. So persistence, sometimes, all good things to those who wait, 14 years later, here we are. So that's that. I was in the St. Louis Guard for a long time. I know this is pretty offensive to many Rangers fans. You got your thing last year. Congratulations. I know 2011 was a tough one, that you had a chance against us in the Cards. But anyway, so that's the end of that. I just did this morning. So I've got about 30 takeaways I can use. I picked 3 of them because you got to have 3 main points, right? It's an Air Force brief. So I'll go with what I thought were the 3, okay? But before, Reagan and Kinder are here, right? Yeah, let me do a shout out to you guys. For a guy who left the active duty after this and came to America, and I just retired 3 months ago, by the way. And I haven't failed retirement yet. I've been retired 3 months, and I've traveled 6 weeks of those 3 months, so it's been great. But there is no way I would have had the military career I had at any other airline than American, okay? The flight office was simply excellent every time we put in a request, every time, and I don't think you guys know actually how significant that is. All of us have friends at other carriers. They were harassed all the time with orders requests, or do you really need to take that off and whatnot, and there's no way I would have stayed 38 years and 7 days total were it not for you guys. So I give you guys a shout out, all right? 3 points. Number 1, you could not have picked a worse time to take on the United States Air Force than 1990, all right? Any 80s era Air Force guys in the 1980s? Remember the stretching? So you remember the big build-up to win the Cold War? The Reagan years, all the money, all the training deployments. I got in 1982, and I did nothing but fly my tail off for the next 8 or 9 years. Money was not an object, equipment, training, and everything else. What the hell was Saddam thinking trying to take on the United States Air Force in 1991? It was just a fool's errand because we were so well-equipped, well-trained, and I think there's kind of a lesson there for us, is that if you want to prevail, make sure you're well-trained and well-equipped, right? Let's see, point number 2, it's a luxury to go to war with public support, right? And I say it's a luxury. How many Vietnam guys do we have in the crowd? So let me ask you this. How was it coming back from Vietnam? No bueno. Yeah, no bueno. So when I was over there, even for our 9 months, we would have these letters addressed to any servicemen with public support, and then even after, as we came back, it was nothing but public support, frankly, for the next, 25 plus years since that, really 30 years with the support we've had, and I had it most of my military career. And my heart goes out to my Vietnam friends. You guys were my flight commanders when I started off as a lieutenant, and I would hear your stories. And once I came back, and I said if I had a public venue, to speak and talk, I would always acknowledge our Vietnam guys. And even though I know you didn't have, the support and treatment that we did, just realize that those of us who served and continue to serve afterwards, we never take that for granted. It's a luxury to have public support, but when we're called to duty, we have to do our duty with or without that. You guys served with that, and it's a special place in my heart for those that had to go through some of the things that you guys saw. So I always tip my hat to those who served. And lastly, doing it right isn't just for the moment, okay? Doing it right isn't just for the moment. What do you mean by that, JD? Well, we did it right. We had a really good squadron. We were well trained. We never refused tasking. To this day, I'll sometimes chuckle with some of my friends who weren't with us. They were on those sides of Saudi, who didn't accept additional tasking. You heard me talk about, I landed at 5 in the morning and I took off at noon. That's not crew rest, but you're in the show. I mean, I flew, I think, 6 times in 5 days, long missions, and I didn't have a lot of sleep in those first 5 or 6 days. And you don't need it. Now, do I advocate violating crew rest during peacetime? Never. No. All right? But when the mission is to shoot down the bad guys, right, you do it. Well, likewise in your training, all right, you do it right the first time so that you continue to do that with your friends ongoingly. Here's the benefit of it. It's not just for the moment. What we enjoy in my reunions, and I think it's the same reason all of you get together as you do, is I'm guessing those in this audience did it right. And if you do it right while you're at your job, whether it's American or military or whatever it is you do, you get to enjoy decades of fellowship after you're done. And that's how I view that. It's not just for the moment, it's for the follow-on moments. And so that's my encouragement for all of us and you that partake of this, is doing it right just doesn't pay for the moment. It pays all of those moments beyond. And I see, all of this fellowship that takes place here and the work and support that goes into it. Obviously, I'm proud that did it right. So my hats off to you for that. And with that, see if I have anything else. No, that's all it is. So with that in mind, I'm going to go back a slide just so that beleaguered Rangers fans aren't meeting me at the door. And I'm going to open it up for questions if there are any. Yes, sir.
What was your intel on the Iraqi pilots?
There's that saying, never underestimate the threat. I think it was more the unknown. Right? 600 aircraft is a lot of airplanes, right? But one of the reasons we devised the nighttime attack is that we owned the night. That was in dispute, right? Nobody likes to, in the military, who wants to night fly, right? In training, it's, it's late, it's just, but because we were so, it's like flying an all-nighter, right? Nobody wants to do it, right? But, we knew that they had utterly no ability to match us at night. So that's why you saw that. And we would do many, it was a 24-hour operation, right? But the ones that had the most risk assets, F-111s, ID that couldn't shoot back, those were all night sorties, right? Just like us, we devised this initial plan to attack the center of gravity at Baghdad in the middle of the night, because we knew that their responses would be less. So we were quite confident in that regard. But if you ask me, did I have butterflies crossing the border on the first night? Of course. And especially when things didn't go according to plan, right? But however, the one thing again that we had going for us was we were so well trained. I had so many reps, all right, coming into this that, you know, Nellis Air Force Base, big training site for fighters. The year before, I think I had 30 or 40 training sorties just at Nellis alone on the northern ranges. And that, so having those kind of repetitions really is such an advantage. So we knew we had, but the MiG-29 is the aircraft that I shut down. That was the newest Soviet fighter. And so we had some unknowns pertaining to that. It had a radar missile. He was locked onto me at about the same range I was locked onto him. You know, their older MiGs couldn't do that. This one could. So we put a healthy but confident respect, if that answers your question.
JB, please repeat the question before you give the answer, please. Thank you.
Okay. Yeah.
I have a question. I remember this campaign years ago when there was a major air assault during the night, the F-111s and all the other aircraft in the bombardment that was under AAA.
Triple.
Was this operation that you were involved with after that or before that?
So I think you're referring to the Libyan raid, which would have been 85, 86, correct? Yeah. And that was the 111s and the Navy EA-6. So the question is, did this operation in Desert Storm mirror what took place in the 86 Libyan raid? To a degree. The thing that was different, though, is Libya didn't have nearly the command and control structure. I mean, they had anti-aircraft artillery, they had surface-to-air missiles that needed to be contended with, but they didn't have the command and control structure that you see in Iraq, nor did they have the robust Air Force. So the other thing that we had at our disposal in this conflict was the launch and the premiere of the F-117 stealth fighter. That was a game changer, that you can take this aircraft unescorted, all right, and fly. And that, you know, you think about, that takes some confidence, right, to go in alone, unafraid, in the middle of the night with no defenses and drop. But it proved successfully because nobody saw it. That was probably the primary, I'd say, difference in the two. Does that answer the question?
Yes.
Okay. What else? I'm not getting out very easy.
How is that stealth technology working today? Have things caught up to it, or?
Yes. So the 117 was kind of the premier launch, if you will, of that technology. And since that time, you had the development of the B-2 stealth bomber, and now you have the follow-on B-2. I forget the name of the 21. Thank you. And then the F-22 and now F-35, which is built right here in Lockheed. Those are all stealth technologies, and they built on the success of that. It's more expensive to build, it's more expensive to maintain, but the benefit you get, of course, is the radar evasion, if you will. That's the benefit. Now, does every fighter need to have stealth? In my opinion, no. You know, stealth kicks down the door. You get to kick down the door, drop bombs, shoot down bad guys, whatever, but a campaign is also one that you just drop bombs on the targets. That doesn't have to have stealth once you leveled the enemy air defenses. So once you take down the command and control, surface-to-air missiles, or enough of the fighters that you can be confident to fly in, then you can go in without stealth. A good example, so after about 3 weeks of this air campaign, B-52s started flying in to soften the Army. And they would go in nightly and drop 150 bombs on Army targets just across the border. And so when, if you looked at how the Iraqis surrendered, they were completely battle fatigued, of getting bombed every single night. And B-52, as you know, is an old airplane, there's no stealth on that. So the 117s, with stealth debut, that technology fed into some of the later fighters and bombers, which we still have today and works. Yes, sir.
Talk about how viable the new F-15EX is today and where it would be used.
So the question is about an F-15EX. So it's interesting being in St. Louis all those years where they're actually built, formerly McDonnell Douglas and then McBoeing as we would call it. They tried to, Boeing made a proposal that I thought was actually pretty good. I gotta get my years straight. I'd probably call it around 2000, 2002, right in that window, for an enhanced F-15, what we would now maybe call an EX, right? And the Air Force at the time was solely focused on F-22, and then the follow-on to the F-16, which became the F-35. And so anything that would compete with that was viewed adversely. But to my earlier comment, you don't, in my opinion, you don't have to have stealth for all of your air power. You need it enough to kick down the door and to weaken up the defenses enough so that other airplanes, in this case the F-15EX, can go in. I'm a big fan of the F-15E and now EX because it's a proven conventional airframe that is lower on the maintenance cost but can deliver a ton of payload, all right? You're not inhibited by the stealth, which limits how much you can carry, you know, and again, I'm a fan of both, but I think you can and should have both. And so that, I hope that answers the question. Oh. Go ahead.
A couple years ago at Oshkosh, I had a bunch of generals up at the theater, and subject of the A-10 came up, and it keeps coming up, and the guy went through the big scenario about how much it costs to keep a weapon system alive, including training, everything you expect. And he was trying to say that we've got so many other capabilities, including things like the B-52 that can drop precision bombs, but you just don't have anything that has that 30 millimeter Gatling gun. Are they still looking at trying to get rid of the A-10?
Yes, short answer. The question is, are they still trying to get rid of the A-10? The answer is yes, and they've been trying to do that for 30 years. All right, they were trying to do this, you know, and the A-10s, they were great in the Gulf War. All right, in fact, it was after the first couple of weeks, there was not much for us to do as air guys. We pretty much leveled, you know, the Iraqi Air Force anyway, and so we were just flying in circles, waiting for something to happen. But if we would see a convoy or something like that, we'd call to the AWACS and say, hey, got any hogs in the area? And oh yeah, so we'd send them in. We'd just fly over the top of them and watch the hogs go in with their 30 millimeter and blow up things. That was the most entertaining part of the day. It's, you know, it's kind of like the F-15EX. You know, the question is, can you replace it with other capabilities and technologies? Probably. But this thing still proves survivable and capable. And then it also gets into the politics. Most of your A-10s tend to reside in the Guard and Reserve. And so when you want to pull them out of the Guard and Reserve, then the local, you know, the congressmen and other people get involved and say, not my state or not my territory, kind of a, so that becomes a challenging dynamic also. You know, the Air Force may want to do one thing in their big sight picture, but then you have to compete politically to make things happen. So it becomes kind of a hot mess. But I think the latest iteration I just read not long ago has them downscaling A-10s. All right. Does that answer the question? Yeah. Okay. Yes, sir.
Kind of touched on a couple of things that warm my heart. We talked about command and control a little bit, and we talked about Nellis. In my previous life, I was the chief of air traffic in Nellis, so I'm very into the red flag and everything that happened there. We had a guy here at weekend named Charlie Warner. Of course, yeah, your smile says it all.
Yeah.
What was it like having a commander that had your back?
Fantastic. I mean, Charlie, you know, Chucky Horner is a warrior. The question is about General Horner, who led the air campaign at Desert Storm, and you know, he was one of my wing commanders when I first got in as lieutenant at home, and so it's everything. You want people who, you know, have grown up through the ranks, who can shoot straight, right? Who can lead and command with authority, and so. In fact, if I could take an aside, so when we get back from this, So we have our big medals celebration, and kind of the rules were we're getting air medals and things like that. And if you had a kill, that was a Distinguished Flying Cross. And if you had 2 kills, that was a Silver Star. So General Horner comes out, and we're all sitting there, and I'll never forget my good friend E.T. Murphy. I just saw him a few months ago. He was a lieutenant with 2 kills. We're all standing there in our blues. He's got his training ribbon, and General Horner looks at him with a Silver Star. He goes, "Well, son, now you got 2." The whole crowd broke up. And so, no, man, yeah. So a big fan, of course. It's great to have. Leadership matters. Leadership matters, and and the results prove themselves. So yeah, big fan. Yes, sir.
What, if any, were there any F-15s shot down by the?
No. Trying to think, and interestingly, so the F-15 is built to fly high. The wing on an F-15, it's called conically cambered, was actually designed to be at 30,000 feet and have enough power to sustain 5 Gs. Okay, so the F-15 is not the fastest airplane. In fact, down low, many fighters can outrun an F-15, big drag, but nobody can compete up high to be able to turn and just stay there. And that's where the missile kinematics are so advantageous, being high, less drag. I can shoot my missiles a lot farther. Okay, so most of us didn't. I stayed mostly above 20,000 feet that whole war. I didn't want to get down where there's AAA, there's surface air missiles and stuff, and that's where all the other people were. I didn't want to run into anyone else either, right? So other than to do some engagements, as soon as we were done, we got right back up and out of the way. So, but no, we did not use any F-15s. Still has the perfect record. It's like 120 to 0 or something like that.
104.
Yeah, 104 thing. So.
Didn't we lose the 130, AC-130 or something?
What's that?
We lost an AC-130?
Yeah, we lost a 111, and I think we lost a 130. I can't remember that, but I was out there when we lost a 111, and that was kind of sad. There was this. It's unbelievable how stories can develop. And so the Mirage F1 that the Iraqis had literally had like a spotlight on it, and it was used to identify tail numbers and such. And it's from the inside they could spot it. Well, somehow or other, this story grew out of what we call Baghdad Billy, and he was flying around spotlighting, and getting ready to shoot one down, and so this became prevalent. In fact, they were telling us that we weren't doing a good enough job of protecting our non-air-to-air fighters. And we're just scratching our heads saying, where is this coming from? Well, sadly one night, this guy saw an artillery flare and thought it was Baghdad Billy lighting him up, and gets in this spiral and flew around. So yeah, it was a just tragic situation that we were scratching our heads trying to figure out where this stuff comes from. Anyway, what else?
JP?
Oh, Charlie.
Yeah, you said you got in 83 when the Air Force was in the F.
82, yes.
82, you spent 35 years plus.
38 and 7 days.
7 days.
First 38 went quick, last 7 days almost killed me.
What did you see the trajectory of the Air Force readiness and everything during that time?
Oh, wow. Well, the first 10 years was a huge buildup. So from 82 through the Gulf War, massive amounts of spending, training, and the rest. But the problem is we won the Cold War. So the Berlin Wall came down in '89. I was just in Berlin last week. It was really cool. And with that comes the peace dividend. And so all my Vietnam friends told me that if you are ever in a downsizing Air Force, get out. All right, so those of you who were in 73, 74 saw that, right? The Air Force was downsizing because after Vietnam. So we downsized in the 90s. But the problem is that we stayed engaged in the Middle East. So what you see here was, got back in '91, I went back to the desert 4 times in the next 8 years. Back to Saudi or Turkey, flying, border protection in Iraq. And so there was only so much we could do. And then 9/11 and ISIS, and one of the strategies was we are in what we call asymmetric warfare. Asymmetric warfare says we don't need these conventional resources anymore. We need more drones. We need more things that can look up and view ISIS and other enemy, in the Middle East. So it's kind of a Middle East centric mentality. So it kind of moved away from the investment in, and it's kind of what killed the F-22, for example, right? So we don't need that anymore. We don't need that against, Russia, China, et cetera. And so we stayed on that trajectory for many, many years. And then when we started to realize, well, maybe we do need that capability, F-35 became part of that equation. We already made the decision to let the F-22 go, but in doing that, the F-35 and now the F-15EX is additional investment into that capability along with the B-21. So we kind of went through this period like, benefiting from the peace dividend, getting into other forms, but now we're in what we call great power competition. So we're with Russia and China, mainly my view China, but you hear a lot about Russia right now. So I think and that's particularly true in the Navy. What's the investment required in the Navy? China's building theirs. We right now still own the seas, which is a good thing. But I think that's the ebb and flow and that's kind of normal in my view. We in the U.S. never wanted a large standing army. All right, this goes all the way back to our revolution. The jolly old England, large standing armies. We said, well, we'll plus up our military in times of war, but then we'll plus it down. That's one of the reasons we have a National Guard and Reserve. That's one thing we do very, very well in this country, is that we can mobilize our Guard and Reserve forces quite rapidly because we keep them pretty well trained, so that if we do need to go and do something, we can. But it's far cheaper to keep that element. So I don't know if that answers that, Charlie, well.
That's a good description of everything. Another thing, you were in Ukraine, the embassy. When were you there?
I believe it was 7 years ago. So I retired militarily 5 years ago, a little over 5 years ago. And my last position is I was the assistant to the United States Air Force's Europe commander. So my boss was a 4-star. And so I would frequently travel. They would dispatch me, to countries in Europe to represent the command. I call it eating and drinking for my country. Because Europe is, they do it right in that form. But so one of the, we were celebrating the 25th anniversary of the partnership between California and Ukraine. You may not know about this, but there's this thing called a state partnership program. Ever heard of that? So when the wall came down and the Soviet Union disbanded, now we've got all these countries that used to be part of the USSR, and we're kind of going, what do we do? We can't really put US troops in there so they came up with this idea. They said, and I'll use Poland as a good example. They said, how can we partner with something that doesn't appear to be inflammatory? And so, any Chicagoans in the crowd? So, where is the largest concentration of Poles outside of Warsaw, Poland? So Poland and the state of Illinois became partners, and that I think was around 90-91, shortly after, and so we have all these partnerships. Well, California and Ukraine have been partners, and so we've had, and I served 5 years in California, so we had members traveling to Ukraine and back, and they would come to California too. And it wasn't just military, it was part of it, but it was also agricultural, hospital, medical, all those kinds of relationships that you build over a long period of time. So we're celebrating the 25th anniversary of it, and then I represented the command. Even I was also a California Guard person at the time, so I was in the embassy at Kyiv as they say, Kyiv. We say Kiev, but Kyiv, Ukraine, and yeah. So I was there and kind of saw what was taking place. Honestly, I didn't like what I was hearing. There was a lot of talk at the time about Ukraine and EU, Ukraine and NATO. I was horrified at what I was hearing, only because, I always think it's important to understand who you're going against, right? And that for Russian history, Belarus and Ukraine have been buffer zones for much of their existence. You can just think back to World War II. The Germans were, driving into Russia. They had to go through Ukraine to do it. That's a long supply chain. And so, so hearing that kind of talk, I was not a big fan of hearing that. I wasn't in a real position to say what I wanted to, but I didn't like what I was hearing, and here we are now, sadly, in this conflict later. I didn't think, well, I'll just leave it at that. I don't know if that, I'll dance around that question, but I thought it was premature to be talking that way. How's that? Yes, sir.
Ukraine, we're sending them airplanes, the Europeans are sending them fighters. What's the training time for the Ukraine pilot to get up to speed and be operational?
Yeah, I don't know the answer to that, actually. I know you're right, we are training them. I don't have a specific, I know what generally it will take, 4 to 6 months is a normal interval for an F-16 training, for example. Now these guys are, experienced flying, say, Su-27s, MiG-29s. So they do fly the latest generation of Soviet equipment, so they're familiar with high-tech fighters. The F-16, is a bit of a different animal. It's typically a 4 to 6, month training element. So that would be the best answer I can give you. But what they're going to do with it beyond that, that was a tough question to answer.
General, I can answer some of that. They're finding that guys that have experience on the Russian equipment can't train on the American equipment. The younger guys that they're being able to train that don't have the indoctrination of the old Soviet Union doctrine. So they're having a tough time finding pilots that fly because the old guys don't get it. They want to fly like they do in the old Soviet days. Our airplanes are not set up for it, nor is our doctrine set up.
So while I was in USAFE, we did an exchange. We took 4, I believe, or 6 F-15s into Ukraine. We flew with them and trained with them. And we would have, they could sit in our backseat, we'd sit in theirs just for orientation flights. And sadly, one of our pilots went in the backseat of a Su-27 flanker, just an older, I think, Colonel Ukraine, and boom, right in the ground, killed them both. So, yeah.
But follow-up question on that, what was your opinion of the politics and corruption in Ukraine when you were over there?
I'll just agree with you. I will agree with what you said, and I'll leave it at that. Yeah. What else? Yes, sir.
The Fresno guys who go to Ukraine and fly with them,
Yeah.
you guys did that, okay, I
Yeah.
saw an article about it.
Yep.
I thought it was-
Yeah, sure do. We've had Fresno guys, one, when I was there, he had been to Ukraine, I believe, 50 times, just in that exchange, in a variety of capacities. But yeah, it was a very robust exchange, and that's true of many state partnerships. The relationships are special. And it's funny that nobody knows about it. But it was designed for this, exchange of information and ideas to help them along to wean off this old system into a new and different system. So, well, am I about to get the hook? No. Okay. No. Anything else? Any?
I have one question.
Yes, sir.
My name is Jackie Moore.
Hi, Jackie.
It's obviously you're a big Cardinal fan.
I don't live there anymore, so.
I wear this ring here, it says Texas Rangers. And I was in that series when I was a Ranger, I was a bench coach. Your 6th game where,
Yes,
two out
in game 6, you had 2 chances.
Right, it's almost impossible, so.
I know.
You think next time you could put Rangers and Cardinals up there?
You remember how I said I'm not going to alter this brief? So, But believe me, it was tough to watch actually being in St. Louis at the time, watching that.
You
So
think about that's impossible twice,
I
two
know.
out of 2 strikes.
I know. I remember it well. That was
And they say
sad.
there's no crying in baseball.
That was fun. Well, redemption finally came last year.
Yes.
So
Thank you.
good for you.
Are Californians volunteering to go fight Ukraine?
What's that?
Are Californians volunteering to go fight Ukraine?
I don't know. Probably. But yeah. Anything else? Yes,
Sir, I
sir.
was gonna ask you about the air defenses over Israel and that recent Iran thing. Do you have any words of encouragement what they did with the ballistic missiles? I think one got through.
Yeah, I mean, as many as they launched, and the success rate of getting them down, I'd say the fire dome and whatnot working pretty well. So, I mean, I think it's a success.
U.S. forces were they instrumental in what they provided?
That I can't answer. Because the exchange that we have, I mean, I knew what I knew 5 years ago, but I'm kind of cut off from that now. Just what I read open source. Yes, ma'am.
Just real quick, I just want to say thank you for your service, thank all of you for your service. We are home of the free, Republic of the brave, love you all, so thank you so much for your service.
Means a lot. Means a lot. Anything else? Anything else? Going once, going twice? All right. My pleasure. Thank you so much.
We've had some phenomenal speakers, and it's all because of you guys. So, JD, once again, thanks for coming over and giving me a speak. So he shot the first F-15 down through the Desert Storm. Sorry.
I would not be standing here if I shot the first
Minor mistake. But my point where I was going with that was we also had the individual here that possibly dropped the last bomb in the Vietnam War. It'd be Jeff Randolph. So, and he didn't get a medal for it either. So that's kind of in it. We're not going to have any luncheon for July, August, and September. We'll have a luncheon. It's going to be real interesting. We might have the Senior Vice President of Flight Ops here, depending on the economy and the hiring, so it'll be a real good update. Then in October, November, we're not going to have a luncheon there because that's going to be the convention here. In November, at the end of the month, it'd be Thanksgiving. And then we plan on Cheryl Guth having the Christmas luncheon at her house in early December. So that's what we've got planned. Then we've got Steve Jacobson had these pictures, and he wanted everybody to have them. Here's DC-10. But anyway, we were going to auction them off, but I thought we're not going to auction them off. Whoever wants them can have them, and if you want to, you can donate $10 or $20 to Steve Fryer for the organization that supports the 2 widows we have still left. Does anybody have anything else they would like to call attention to or mention? Once again, the convention, October, November timeframe, and that's all we got. Thanks for coming. Oh, one other thing, thank you for everybody that RSVP as early as you can, and I really appreciate that. It helps us in planning. But once again, if you find out that you didn't know if you could make it or not, and at the last minute you can, come on, they've got flexibility. It's just that the RSVP can really do well Jay Gilligan's plan. So, and JB, once again, fantastic. Thank you very much. And that concludes the luncheon. Everybody